find people who work there and see if you can find a way in to have a conversation with them to just kind of do a little backdoor reference check, if you will. The same way the company's going to do a reference check on the candidate, do a reference check on the health of the company. That's probably the best way. Because, I mean, you can look at Crunchbase and look at their funding and their investing, but that's not going to necessarily tell you anything.
Hey, I'm Corrina.
And I'm Taylor.
And this is Direct, a podcast we created to showcase the creativity and hard work of go-to-market teams everywhere.
We're here to share the stories and experiences of the hardworking, passionate individuals who make up go-to-market teams, the ones who truly make the magic happen.
Taylor and I have been fortunate enough to work side by side on some incredible projects together, and now we want to put a spotlight on the unsung heroes behind some of the best go-to-market campaigns out there.
In each episode, you'll hear from individual contributors who have gone above and beyond to make a difference. They'll share their challenges, victories, and the lessons they've learned along the way, all to help you unlock the next step in your career. Get ready to be inspired, learn something new, maybe even share a laugh or two.
Welcome to Direct.
Welcome back to Direct. I'm here with my co-host, Corrina Owens. Hi, Corrina.
Hi.
We are super excited today to be joined by Sue Keith, Corporate Vice President of Ceres Talent, a national search firm based in Washington, D.C. that specializes exclusively in marketing and communications positions. She's on career number 3. She has a dual major in accounting and French and identifies as a recovering CPA. She's always had a passion for French and is getting closer to be fluent by the day. Sue, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Sue, we are so excited to have you here. Before we get into it, I know this is a very special episode that we have, and we're thrilled to have you on today. We ask all our guests one question, and that is, if you had a magic wand, what would you change about your job or maybe other aspects of your life that you could just zap and voila?
Sure. I love that you actually have a wand. Well, I'm going to tie it back to the intro that Taylor shared with the French piece. So I think I spent a semester in Paris in college, and it was the most amazing experience of my life, probably, but it wasn't an immersion program. And somewhere in COVID, it occurred to me that my lifelong goal of becoming fluent in French was actually not going to happen with a magic wand. I was going to need to do more than just wish it. So I've been busy taking classes and doing all sorts of things, very slowly limping my way towards perhaps fluent one day. So
Perfect.
The wand would be, I would do an immersion program in France. I would go back and do it that way. And then I would have come out of there a lot closer to than I am today.
We get a lot of time traveling questions, which I could go back, or answers, I should say, which I could go back in time.
Can I also just eliminate high school?
Yeah, right? Yeah, for real.
Very relatable. This is a very special episode of Direct, as we wanted to address some really pressing questions our audience has as it relates to landing their next gig. And we're incredibly excited to have you on to talk about this as opposed to our normal sort of campaign-based and really address, to open it up, your perspective on this job market, incredibly competitive job market right now that we're in. It seems like a really unique circumstance that I haven't seen before. What is your perspective on what's going on in the job market right now, Sue?
I would agree. Things are pretty unusual. As you know, we specialize in marketing positions, and it's a pretty big category. So marketing, comms, creative, and product is best way to categorize it. And the reason we do that is everyone on our team spent the majority of our careers in marketing before we kind of took the interesting stumble into recruiting. As you heard, I started my career as an accountant. So then it was marketing, then it was recruiting. I like to say only the first part of that was intentional. The rest was just opportunities coming my way. So we've been at this for about 11 years. I'm going to to answer the question, I'm going to go back to COVID, which crazily enough started almost exactly 4 years ago next month. So believe it or not, it was 4 years ago. What happened at that point is the hiring market, and I'm going to speak specifically for marketing positions. The hiring market came to a screeching halt. I mean, people thought the world was going to stop turning. And so hiring budgets just got screeching halt. The good news is, at least for us, is because we do full-time placements, but we also do contractors and fractional placements. The work still needed to get done. So while the headcount budgets were frozen, CMOs and marketing leaders still had budget, they had discretionary budget that they could use to bring in contractors. So we saw that part of our business bump up pretty significantly while they couldn't hire directly. Then towards the end of 2020, we started seeing this kind of signs of life in hiring. And we weren't sure it was really real or not because, we were still in the first year of COVID. But then, as I think everybody knows, 2021 exploded in terms of hiring, especially in B2B marketing, which is where most of our clients are in the B2B tech space. And it was all that pent up demand, that latent hiring that hadn't happened in 2020 just exploded. And when there were a lot of companies that did really well in COVID. Think, on the consumer side, think Peloton. On the business side, think Zoom. All those things where, there was also a lot of industries like hospitality that really took a hit. But we talked to a lot of folks who were hurt by that. But it just exploded. Almost too much so in the sense that the hiring market wasn't healthy. I mean, people were, just grabbing at candidates as best they could. People were jumping job to job. They were spending 6 months somewhere, and then someone would come a calling with a better offer and a better title. And that went on for about a year and a half. And then in the middle of 22, we started seeing some signs of a slowdown. One of our biggest consumer clients, we had 3 searches we were working on them, full-time searches for them that they put on hold. And we started seeing what kind of, if devolved, I should say, into what 2023 last year looked at like for marketers, especially B2B marketers. And it was a really tough year. I mean, and it's continuing into 2024. You've seen the layoffs that continue in the sector. And we're talking to, our team probably talks to at least 10 really, really talented marketers. And I know we'll get to this a little bit later, a week, who have amazing background, great references, but are really struggling with finding a job because they're just not that many. So that's what we're working with. That said, we are seeing some glimmers of hope. I mean, the economy, after being, these fears of a recession we've been living under for a couple of years, really, I think we can all agree, most agree that we're really not headed that way. Consumer sentiment's great. Inflation's coming down. People are spending money on travel and discretionary things. So that overall macroeconomic market is in pretty good shape. And just from our perspective, we have a sister company called HRQ that specializes exclusively in HR positions. And for the first time in a couple of years, they're seeing demand for talent acquisition people. So if companies are hiring recruiters, then the companies are clearly looking to hire. So we're seeing from a kind of a leading indicator perspective, we're seeing some hope and optimism there.
Talk to us a little bit more about that, because I think for a lot of people that are on the market today, it's hard to understand what companies they should really be investing their time and energy and effort into the interview process. So I think that's a really great tactical tip that you just called out is if they're hiring for those positions, they're likely a very healthy company at the moment. Yep. There's a forward trajectory. What are some other tips that you would say for job seekers that they should be paying attention to really evaluate the health of the company? What I'm seeing for my peers is a lot of them are getting hired and then let go in the next month. So yeah. It's this weird thing of like, people are finally landing jobs after being unemployed for so long, but then they'll be let go so quickly.
One thing you can certainly do is find people who work there and see if you can find a way in to have a conversation with them to just kind of do a little backdoor reference check, if you will. The same way the company's going to do a reference check on the candidate, do a reference check on the health of the company. That's probably the best way. Because, I mean, you can look at Crunchbase and look at their funding and their investing, but that's not going to necessarily tell you anything. So we spend a lot of time like I mentioned, a lot of our clients are growth stage companies, investor backed. We also spend a lot of time with investors. So we do dinners and do a lot of talking about this topic. And, this idea that for years it was grow at all costs has turned into show us profitability now or show us your path to profitability. And what happens is you can't just turn revenue on a dime, but you can cut your expenses. And as one CMO I was talking to recently said, when the CFO starts on his or her, I should say, journey to go find cost cutting, the first door they knock on is marketing. Marketing is easy it's one of the first to go. So that's really what a lot of companies are struggling with. And that's what you're not going to find on a Crunchbase or any public profile that says, hey, the investors just told this company they have to be profitable in the next 18 months, and they're about to do it by laying off marketing people. But what you can do is do your best to talk to people who are already there, however you can figure out a way to get in to talk to them. The other thing you can do is if you look at the head of marketing, the CMO position at the company, look for turnover. If you're seeing them churn through marketing leaders, that's a good sign that either one, they've got a strategy problem, two, they've got an issue with how they value marketing, or three, there's a funding problem.
Yeah, I think those are really great things to consider. Back channeling always. I know even too, when I leave a role, I have a minimum of like 50 people reaching out to me as they're trying to backfill my role. What advice would you say so obviously, again, as Taylor alluded to, it's a super crowded market. And as you alluded to, with incredibly talented senior professionals, are there still some common mistakes that you're seeing candidates are making in the application or interview process that you would want to call out and highlight that we could be mindful of?
Sure, there are a few. So the first one I'd start with is understand the market. And what I mean by that is my team lives every day the fact that there are a lot of marketers losing their jobs and struggling to find a new one because every job has 300, 400 applicants. For someone who has not been in the job market and only going back to the media talking about low unemployment, that's news to them. And there are a lot of people, and they shouldn't. I mean, we live it every day, but why would they know other than what they've heard at the macroeconomic level is that unemployment's super low. Everyone can get a job. And so that's one understanding. I think there's a little bit of shock if you're in the position of having to find another job, seeing, if you apply for something on LinkedIn, you can see how many applications have been put in there. It's in the hundreds typically. And suddenly you're thinking, oh my gosh, I had no idea this kind of competition out there. So that's one understanding. So just being prepared that it could be a slog. Number two is be really realistic. Because the market is the way that it is, you are unlikely to leave a job and get a bump in salary. So how do we typically, the way through the course of your career, that if you stay at a company for a really long time, you're going to kind of do steady little incremental increases. The way to bump it is to move and to leave and switch jobs. This is not the time to expect that or to ask for that. We still have candidates who've been out of a job for a couple of months saying they want a number. And when I say, so is that about where you were before? Well, no, I was, 30 grand less. And this is not the time to just go for it. Now, if you have the luxury of waiting this out, good for you. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm saying if you need a job, do not price yourself out of the market. This is just not the time to get that bump. The other thing is, we wrote a blog post on this. So on LinkedIn, you can just click their easy apply button to apply. And we can tell when someone's done that because Lord knows what version of the resume LinkedIn might have of yours. It's very obvious that you've just hit the button. And unfortunately for that, I understand why LinkedIn built that is because why have to upload the same information over and over again. But what it meant is we call that easy apply button, the lazy apply button. So what you should be doing is for every position you're interested in, you should be customizing your resume for that position. It doesn't mean you're rewriting your resume, but it means you are looking at the keywords that they're looking for, or maybe how they call something. This is old school example, but maybe they say lead gen, your resume says demand gen or vice versa. Or maybe they're calling it a director of growth marketing and your resume doesn't have the word growth on it. So doing that and making sure you look at your resume and taking a look and making sure the words that you think whoever's on the receiving end of your resume is going to be looking for. One of the ways you can do this is drop your resume and drop the job description into a word cloud generator and do a comparison and see. So if the job description pops up one word, the biggest word in the cloud, and you don't really have that word on your resume, and as long as it's true that you've done it, make sure you get that on your resume. And make sure you have an areas of expertise or a core competency section on your resume with a bulleted list of your top functional areas. Because think of that as the cliff notes for your resume for the person on the receiving end. The other thing you can do is use ChatGPT. You can copy the job description into ChatGPT and say something, give it a prompt, something like, what are the most common words in this text? And it'll be it's similar to a word cloud. You're going to get popped out a bunch of words. Again, compare your resume to that and make sure you've got the words that whoever's on the receiving end of you and 200 of your friends' resumes you want to give them a reason to stop at yours, because you should assume about 3 seconds. So 3 Mississippis for someone to take a look at your resume. And if they're not seeing the words that you're looking for, then they're going to find, because they're looking for a reason to cull down 200 applications.
Absolutely. And I love how tactical all of that advice was. I just recently went through a process of hiring someone, digging through those hundreds and hundreds of applications, and can concur that easy apply button. I can tell every single time. I like the idea of the Chat GPT version of it, but also making sure that you take the time to honestly focus on translating that into your actual resume, as opposed to, I definitely could tell when there were a couple of Chat GPT like cover letters.
Yes.
And then the resume was totally out of line with it.
Yeah. And then I should, just to clarify, I'm not suggesting using ChatGPT to write any part of your resume. I'm suggesting use ChatGPT to parse the job description to see what words, and then making sure you've written those in and incorporated them in the right way. But yeah, it's fairly obvious when ChatGPT has written something. And so the other thing I would say is, to that point, I would also, this is going to sound fairly harsh, but don't lie. And I don't mean don't embellish. I mean, don't lie. So I was talking to my team earlier this week about how, so when we post a position for one of our clients on LinkedIn or on our own website, we have some screening questions that you have to answer in order to get your resume through. And so if it's something like the job is, you have to be local to the DC market where we are, say, and we ask that question, and you live in California, don't lie and say, yes, I'm in the DC. I can commute to DC. And we have, do you have this type of experience? Yes. Because if you think about it, to what end? I mean, you will eventually be found out. And that's just going to, put a black mark on your profile to our whole team. And so I know some people are really, I feel for them because they really, really need a job. Maybe they're the breadwinners, or maybe they've been out for a while and there's bills to pay and mortgages, et cetera. But you're not going to get a job that way. You might get an interview, but you're going to get caught. The last thing is network like crazy. And ask people to help open a door. And I know this can be really uncomfortable for people, but I have a mantra that if you don't ask, you don't get. So do the research, figure out who you can find connected to someone who's connected to the company, and then just ask. And the person may say, no, I'm not comfortable with that, but they might say yes too. And if you don't ask, you'll never know. So I think that's a lot, your application will go into the pile, but then do that kind of surround sound work to go find a way to get, as I call it, get your resume to a human.
That is just such fantastic tactical advice. And even, I think, letting people know that it's okay to ask for what you want in this regard. And as we were alluding to earlier, there are some incredibly talented people. I think that's what's really unique about what I've been seeing in the layoffs in, say, the last 6 months, is just very unexpected announcements, very happening all over the place. Corrina and I both have really large networks, and some people that we know are high performers and show results still being impacted by this.
Mm-hmm. I would say, like I said, go back to making sure your resume. So we're marketers, right? We're communicators. We're supposed to understand how to come up with the right messaging to resonate with the target audience. And it's amazing how many people don't think about this for their own resume. So do everything you can on your resume to make it, again, it has to be accurate, it has to be true, but to align to everything they're looking for. Don't hit the easy apply button, or don't just even if you're not hitting that button, don't just throw your standard resume in. You have multiple versions. So if you have, I was talking someone the other day who has a really strong product marketing background and a really strong demand background. She could do either role. She has a product marketing version of her resume, and she has a demand version of her resume. And again, you want to customize whichever one you're going to use for that each individual role, but start thinking about it that way. That is probably the best way to do it. And here's a couple really silly tactical examples. They're actually not silly. They're just very granular. Under your name, at the top of your resume, we recommend you put a headline. I call it your thing. So again, if you think about the person on the receiving end of your resume, there's 200 others in the pile They may be an internal recruiter for the firm who has to fill up all jobs. So they're probably not a marketing expert, nor should they be expected to be. So they too are looking for the words that the job description says in the resume. So if you put your thing, call it, demand gen leader or product marketing manager or communications executive, whatever makes sense, that ties to the job, that's the first place they're looking. So that's going to catch their eye. And they say, okay, that person has the words there that I'm looking for. So start there. Like I said, a core competency or areas of expertise section, a quick summary, areas of expertise section, again, in bullets. So, because don't do it in prose or no one's going to read it. It's just going to look like a bunch of words. Do the bullets, again, at Cliff Notes. Say, okay, I just saw it. I'm looking for demand gen and Marketo and buyer personas. I see them. And then, that'll bring that person to want to read a little further. So again, it comes down to the resume. And then you mentioned cover letters. So cover letters are a very controversial topic. My take is if you write a cover letter that is very, very customized and well-written and specific to the job, it can help. If you send in a generic cover letter that looks like it was written by ChatGPT, or you clearly has nothing to do with this specific job that you're interested in, I think it will hurt you. You're better off not sending it. But a cover letter can help you stand out if it's written well. Again, I would also say, chances are it won't get read, but it might get read. And if it's good, it's probably worth your time to do it.
That's really helpful. Hurt you, help you, right? Very simple. Cover letters are going to hurt you if you don't take the time to personalize them, but they can certainly help. But it sounds like potentially more harm can be done here on the applicant's part.
Yeah, if you don't think your cover letter is good, then don't do it.
Yeah. I hate cover letters. I've always just despised writing them. And I despise reading them. Like when I interview for them too, I don't know. I think it's a little bit of a lazy kind of ask of during the interview process. I feel like we should be able to suss out a lot of this either within the resume or in your initial conversation with the candidate. So I don't know how impactful a cover letter is for me on either side of the coin.
I think it depends on the letter. I know I've talked to a couple of people because I thought their letter was so clever.
Yeah.
That I said, I actually have said, I don't think this person's even a right fit for the job. I think they are so interesting and they've got other marketing talents. We could use them potentially down the road that I have talked to someone over a cover letter.
So you will read all cover letters then?
For the most part, or at least I'll take a glance. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Because I was hearing you say too that most people don't often read cover letters too. And I know when I've been hiring, I don't really read them. I just scan them.
Yeah, you fall in the most bucket.
Right.
I read them mostly somewhat maybe out of curiosity too, because I love to see what somebody writes.
Yeah. Well, marketing is clearly your specialty. It's clearly your firm's specialty. You guys recently did a research report about the top 3 most in-demand marketing jobs in 2024. Can you tell us a little bit more about those and what listeners can expect to see in that report?
Sure. So the first one is customer marketing. And we started seeing a rise in those as a discrete position as opposed to kind of wrapped into the demand role post-COVID. And the reason that is, as you all know, so demand gen can be a fairly predictable model. You spend this much on Google and paid here, and you do a couple of webinars there, and you do some emails, and you can kind of calculate your conversion rates. That all went out the window in COVID because, I heard so many marketers saying, well, I've got so many more people coming to our webinars, or so many more people agreeing to do demos, but no one's converting. It's because they were bored and they had nothing to do. So for a while there, people got on webinars. So started thinking, wait a minute, especially for SaaS companies or with subscriptions, wait a minute, if we retain more of our customers, we need to get fewer net new logos in the door. And by the way, there's a customer success team sitting on what I call customer intel gold that marketing's not talking to figure out, okay, why are they leaving? Why are they not renewing? But also, what use cases are your customers using your product for? You might not even know. And that's a way to go sell to new. So that's what we saw customer marketing. The other thing that's really interesting about customer marketing is that I kind of talked about the kind of retention piece. But there's really 2 flavors of customer marketing. There's more on the engagement, retention, using your customers as advocates, user groups, case studies, et cetera. But there's now customer marketing that's really a demand gen role. But the idea is you're going back into your existing customers to get more business out of them. So it's truly demand. You just happen to know who your targets are. And if your customer, so we placed a director of customer marketing at a large telecom company recently because they had a new board member who got on the board and said, wait a minute, you have really large customers. What are you doing about getting more business out of the ones we already have? And board member said it, therefore a position was born. And that really, though, is really about a demand gen role. It just so happens you've got your list of strategic accounts already set.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because it ties so much to so Taylor and I both have disciplines in account-based marketing, and retention is definitely the new acquisition. It's definitely important to have that a part of any kind of net new play in an organization. And it's funny, just like I've been saying kind of throughout this whole time, like we can constantly as marketers kind of slice and dice and flavor our resume, flavor our experience based on what the market needs, based on what the company needs. I mean, to your point, customer marketing, and it used to be kind of more of the advocacy, and now it is being seen more as a revenue driver and a little bit more of a strategic function. And I hope that most of these marketing roles that are popping up for you all are having more of that flavor, like less of the tactical. I think with all of the advancements in AI and technology too, like we have to be more business mindset. So I'm wondering, I mean, is that also what you're seeing for across the board with the different marketing positions you're hiring, that they have more of that financial acumen, maybe more of the business acumen as well as the creative side too?
Absolutely. And in fact, that's a good segue because number 2 on that list of in demand jobs in 24 is ABM. And so, it's really interesting as its own discipline at this point. And so what we saw, it started on the demand, so net new logo side of things. But we're really seeing it more on the customer marketing side of things. But again, not the advocacy part of customer marketing, the demand piece. And if you think about it, it's perfectly positioned for customer marketing because you are, like I said earlier, you already have your list of strategic accounts. You know who they are, and you probably have some, insights into what's going on in that company. And then you can wrap your ABM campaigns around that. So that's where we're seeing ABM becoming a really big play. But for example, we're doing a senior director demand gen position right now, and the head of marketing is shifting their entire marketing strategy to ABM. It will be all ABM.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So that's the tie-in between customer marketing and ABM. And then the third one kind of cheated a little bit because it's not a new position per se, but it is a reframing. So we call it growth marketing. So it's a reframing of demand gen or customer acquisition if you're on the consumer side. And again, it's this idea of tying marketing. So marketing historically considered a cost center, connecting marketing to growth or revenue. And I think this is a really great thing to say, okay, revenue is generated by both marketing and sales, even though sales gets credit for the close, right? But a lot of those leads came from marketing, the brand, the air cover, all the pieces that marketing brings to that thought leadership. I love that marketing is now getting connected to the growth or the revenue piece. So you're seeing more positions become director of growth marketing where it used to say director of demand.
I've been seeing that trend too. And I've been wondering, like, over the year, like, what am I supposed to make of this growth title? Is it more the paid, like, media growth? But no, I think to your point, I think we are kind of reframing and retitling director of demand gen with director of growth.
Which I love to see because it just, again, I feel like it gives marketing equal seat at the revenue table.
Yep. I love it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have covered quite a lot, and you've given us some really incredible tactical tips for our team, for our listeners. What we wanted to kind of start to wrap up with, you gave us a hot take at the beginning about not necessarily anticipating a salary bump when you are affected by a layoff and coming on. Can you leave us with a couple more hot takes that you might have or controversial potential opinions in this current job market and hiring?
So, yes. And these, I'm going to flip this a little bit. And these are more kind of our tips for hiring managers or hiring companies, not necessarily candidates, but it should help candidates, I would hope. So first thing is short stints. So short tenures at a company. They are like there's an allergic reaction to see by hiring managers to seeing short stints on the resume. But considering we're talking about mostly B2B tech, we've already talked about what's been going on in the sector since for the last couple of years. It's been layoffs, not hiring. And so those short stints, it's almost, I want to say you should expect them. If they're a good B2B marketer, they probably have short stints on their resume. And it is not a reason to write someone off. And especially if they have legitimate reasons. Now, if you go back in someone's career over the last 10 or 15 years and they haven't been able to stay anywhere for longer than a year or 18 months, that's probably problematic. But looking back, don't in the last few years, if you've seen a couple of changes, I mean, Corrina, you said it yourself, and then we see it. People get hired and they're laid off 2 months later. I mean, that's what's happening right now. And that is certainly not a performance issue. And if the person has references, or perhaps, in the case of someone I just talked to recently, she got caught up in a couple of layoffs, but every company she got brought into was by a former boss. She's clearly good. So just don't write someone off the face of it when you see those short stints in the more recent years. And this is the part where it's not controversial per se, but I have said this to a CMO, take a look at your own resume. There are some short stints on there. Right? This happens to everybody. So that's my number one. Number two is don't be, again, this is hiring managers, especially if you're looking for, and I know there's a lot of candidates to pick from right now, but I still think it's important to keep this in mind that don't necessarily be locked into someone from your industry. Now, I know for like a product marketing role, that's probably pretty important, especially because you want to have credibility talking with product managers, the engineers, and the salespeople. But a demand person, a customer marketing person, a comms person, marketing ops person, we don't see it necessary to come out of the same industry. And I'm not talking about B2C to B2B. I'm talking within the B2B industry, let's say, because there's some really good best practices that can come across industry that someone with a fresh perspective coming into the company could bring in and really accelerate some marketing success. And then the last thing, and I think this is especially important to point out, given what I just said earlier about that it's clearly a hiring company's market right now. For in 2021, the leverage shifted temporarily to candidates, which went too far. We're now in a situation where the leverage is shifted entirely to the hiring managers or hiring companies' side. And I think it's really important to remember that employees' experience starts with their first interview. And there's a brand component here for the company to keep in mind that if the candidate has a very negative experience through the interview process, whether they get ghosted, which we hear of a lot, or they're asked to meet with 10 people over it's taking up a lot of time, or they're asked to do 2 presentations, that even if they get the job, just remember, we all worry about employee experience once you start, after your start date, but it started on day one with that first interview. And just if the experience is bad, that person could be your potential customer someday, and they're not going to forget that bad experience. So just even though there's certainly the leverage and there's, it's a nice time to be hiring because you have a lot of people, really good people to be choosing from, just don't forget there's a person behind every resume. And that it could, like I said, a bad candidate experience has a halo effect.
Those are all incredible. I mean, hot takes. Those are just great formats and tips for understanding what hiring managers should be thinking of. And it feels good as a potential candidate to know that people are considering those things. Actually, I want to click into the second one that you gave about cross-industry. I don't know if you know this, Sue. The reason Corrina and I are friends is because she recruited me from LinkedIn and pulled me from a manufacturing B2B background into tech. God, Corrina, is that 4 or 5 years ago now?
Yeah, 4 years ago. Yeah.
And I'm going to take the moment to ask, Corrina, I don't know that I've ever asked you how you found me.
If it was through LinkedIn, you did apply. You stood out to me. I could kind of tell that you had the the drive and the marketing interest. And I do recall too that that was a big deal at the time when I had to go back to my hiring team, that you weren't in the industry, the
Oh,
space.
really?
Yeah, I had to defend Taylor on that, and that she didn't have certain skill sets that I would need for her to excel in the job. But I'm a firm believer that if you have the drive, if there's a will, there's a way. And I gave Taylor just a couple of tips, and she came back that same evening with a Google certification, Google Ads certification, and I championed Taylor the whole way, and I'm so glad, because look at where you are today, and look at what you're going to continue to do. But yeah, so I mean, to echo off of what Taylor was saying, it's so comforting to hear somebody in your position echo something like that too, because I do think it's one of those biases that unfortunately is in our industry. And so it's really comforting to hear you call that out.
And no, I did not know that. So that was not a plant. I just love what I just said. You're like, yep, living proof. Here it was. I was going to joke that we know she didn't hire you based on your cover letter, because even if you had written one, she didn't read it.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Well, Sue, thank you so much. I mean, there's going to be just soundbite after soundbite here that people are going to be able to implement and take away. And I just can't think of a more timely episode than to have this with you. So thank you just first off so much for coming and joining me and Taylor on this podcast. Your insights have been just invaluable.
You're very welcome. This was a lot of fun. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Well, before we let you go, we did want to revisit the magic wand question.
Okay.
And I have an idea. I don't know if you've heard of it. So obviously there's no replacing being in person. I think we all know that. But for you to fully immerse yourself, I'm wondering, have you ever heard of an app called Tandem?
I have not.
Okay, so on this app Tandem, you get matched with another native speaker. So you would love to be immersed in French. They would be a native French speaker. And ideally, they would love to be immersed in English. And so they would be matched with a native English speaker. And you guys can go back and forth. There's different like transcriptions that you can see below the bottom. But basically, you're going to have a native speaker who's also invested in learning the language that you're fluent in. And so you kind of get to learn like on the go, like think of it like texting or WhatsApp, right? Yeah. But that could be a way for you to do this, in lieu of being in person.
I love that. I've not heard of that. That sounds like a brilliant idea. Have you used it yourself?
I have friends who have used it, and there are some really, really funny stories. It is an internet app, but I mean, the concept is brilliant. It's basically like free to very, very low cost. And like, as a former educator, I just love the aspect of like, you guys are both equally bought in, right? Because you're both taking equally from each other. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thank you for that. I can't wait to check it out. And I absolutely know.
Yay. Well, thank you so much, Sue. We so appreciate you. And if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you or find out more about your firm, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Hit me up on LinkedIn anytime. And then our website is Ceres Talent.
Thank you so much for being on, Sue.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Direct with Corrina and Taylor.
If you enjoyed what you heard in today's episode, please give us a follow, maybe even a 5-star review, wherever you listen to your podcast.
And if you know someone that you'd like to spotlight, if you want to share your own story, visit us at motionagency.io/direct. We'd love to hear from you.